The air in Pisa was heavy with the weight of centuries, thick with the scent of incense and old parchment. It was 1564, and the world was a static, ordered place. According to the ancients, the earth was the unmoving center of a perfect, divine mechanism, and to question this was not just to challenge physics, but to challenge God himself. Into this world of rigid certainty was born Galileo Galilei, a man whose eyes would eventually pierce the celestial veil and reveal a universe far more restless and vast than anyone dared to imagine. As a young student, Galileo possessed a temperament that was fundamentally incompatible with the status quo. He was born into the waning glow of the Renaissance, an era that celebrated human potential but still knelt at the altar of Aristotle. In the lecture halls, truth was something found in books, not in the world. If Aristotle said that heavier objects fell faster than lighter ones, it was accepted as gospel. But Galileo was not a man of books, he was a man of the pulse. He watched the swinging of a chandelier in the Cathedral of Pisa and realized that its rhythm was independent of the arc's width, the first glimmer of the laws of motion. He was already learning that nature spoke a language of its own, a mathematical dialect that didn't care for the opinions of dead philosophers. By the time he reached his 30s, Galileo had become a professor, yet he felt like a prisoner of a closed system. The scientific environment was a stagnant pond of syllogisms. He began to chip away at the Aristotelian facade, proving through rigorous experiment that motion was governed by observable, repeatable laws. This was the birth of the scientific method, the radical notion that we should not ask what should happen based on logic, but observe what does happen based on evidence. Then, in 1609, a rumor reached him from the north, a spyglass that could make distant things appear close. While others saw it as a toy for sailors or a tool for war, Galileo saw it as a key. With the hands of a craftsman and the mind of a visionary, he ground his own lenses, perfecting the instrument until it could magnify the heavens 30 times over. On a crisp autumn night in Padua, he turned this glass toward the moon. The world expected to see a perfect, smooth orb of celestial ether. Instead, Galileo saw craters. He saw jagged mountains and deep, shadowed valleys. The heavens were not perfect, they were geological. They were real. His hunger grew. He turned the lens toward Jupiter and noticed 3 tiny stars flanking the planet. Over successive nights, he watched them dance, realized they were moving with Jupiter, circling it like a miniature solar system. These were the Medicean stars, moons that did not orbit the Earth. This was the crack in the dam. If everything did not revolve around the Earth, then the Earth was not the unique, motionless hub of existence. When he observed the phases of Venus, which mirrored those of our moon, the geometric proof became undeniable: Venus circled the Sun. Galileo was no longer just a mathematician, he was a cartographer of a new reality. He championed the heliocentric model of Copernicus, not as a mathematical convenience, but as physical truth. But truth, he would soon learn, is a dangerous guest in a house built on dogma. The conflict that followed was not merely between a man and an institution, but between 2 ways of knowing. The Church saw the universe as a moral hierarchy, Galileo saw it as a mathematical equation. He was summoned to Rome, warned, and eventually silenced. For years, he retreated into a restless quiet, but the fire of discovery cannot be smothered by an edict. In 1632, he published his dialogue concerning the 2 chief world systems, a brilliant, biting work that laid bare the absurdity of the old geocentric view. The reaction was swift and merciless. At 70 years old, frail and failing in health, Galileo was hauled before the Inquisition. We can only imagine the inner landscape of a man who had seen the moons of Jupiter, standing in a dim, stone room before men who refused to even look through his telescope. They demanded he recant. They threatened him with the instruments of torture. In that moment, Galileo faced the ultimate moral cost. To hold on to the truth was to invite the fire, to renounce it was to save his body but lose his soul. He knelt on the cold floor and whispered the words of recantation, denying everything his eyes knew to be true. Legend tells us that as he rose, he muttered under his breath, "Epres I move," and yet, it moves. He spent the final decade of his life under house arrest in the hills of Arcetri. It was a period of profound, echoing loneliness. He became blind, a cruel irony for a man who had seen further than any human in history. Yet, even in the dark, his mind remained agile. He smuggled his final, greatest work, Two New Sciences, out of Italy to be published in the free air of Holland. It was his final act of defiance, the foundational text of modern physics. Galileo Galilei died in 1642, a prisoner in his own home, but a liberator of the human mind. He paid the price of being right too early. He traded his freedom for our clarity, enduring the weight of isolation so that humanity could finally step off its imaginary pedestal and join the dance of the stars. His legacy is not just the telescope or the moons of Jupiter, it is the courage to trust our senses over our superstitions. He taught us that the universe is written in the language of mathematics, and that it is our birthright, and our duty, to read it. Today, as our probes reach the edge of the solar system and our telescopes peer back to the dawn of time, we do so through the eyes of the blind old man from Arcetri. Knowledge is a flame that once lit, can never be truly extinguished. But it requires someone to hold it in the wind. Galileo was that torchbearer. He reminds us that the pursuit of truth is a lonely road, often paved with sacrifice, but it is the only road that leads to the stars. In the silence of the night, if we look up, we can still hear the echo of his defiance. The world moves, the truth remains, and the light of reason never sets.